Welcome to NDE Insight Channel. In today's narrative, the narrator will share a touching story about encountering a boxer dog in heaven, a loving companion who had left him many years ago. Our pets hold such a special place in our hearts, becoming cherished members of our households. As a result, our hope is to meet them once again in the heaven. However, whether our pets can go to heaven after death is a highly debated topic. Therefore, in the concluding part of the video, we have comments specifically addressing this topic. Feel free to watch until the end and join the discussion.
When I was around 12 years old, my dad went on a business trip to visit relatives or for some other reason. I remember wanting to go with him at the time, but school was still in session. So, he and my mom decided it was best for me to stay with my dad's sister, my Aunt Heather. I won't bore you with the details of every day I spent with her, but when my dad returned, he brought back a boxer dog as a gift for me. It was my first pet ever. I vividly remember that afternoon when I opened the door, and there, on the living room sofa, was a fluffy little dog wagging its tail. Its fur was a grayish-brown, and the distinctive white spots on its face made it look very cool. It seemed to know I was its future owner, wagging its tail and licking my hands incessantly. In that moment, I felt a rush of excitement and a deep connection, as if there was a special understanding between us. It wasn't just a dog, it felt more like a companion and friend. It took me about a week to finally decide on naming him Blaze. Blaze became my best friend, but as a teenage boy, my attention quickly shifted to chasing girls. I would often go out on dates, play games with the girls, and the time spent with Blaze dwindled. I sensed that he was feeling a bit neglected and lost. By the time I was 14, I hardly had any time for Blaze, as there were always other things catching my attention. One day, in a hurry to meet friends, I forgot to lock the front gate, allowing Blaze to run out of the yard. That evening, when I returned home, my dad was there holding a shovel. I was puzzled because my dad never did yard work. Did he suddenly decide to plant something? Angrily, my dad asked if I forgot to lock the gate. I timidly replied, yes. He pointed to the freshly dug hole and shouted, "Look at what you've done." To my horror, I saw Blaze, my beloved dog, lying in the freshly dug hole, covered in blood. He was dead. I burst into tears instantly. Blaze had been hit by a car. If I hadn't forgotten to lock the gate, this wouldn't have happened. So, I always believed it was my fault that Blaze died, and I carried a heavy sense of guilt, feeling downcast in everything I did. In an attempt to console me, my mom told me that Blaze was in a better place, and I assumed she meant heaven. However, I had never heard of animals being in heaven. In my understanding, heaven had clouds, tall buildings, God's throne, and a host of angels surrounding him. I had never heard of horses, flocks of sheep, or the boxer dog I loved being in heaven. Therefore, I was skeptical of my mom's comforting words. It took quite a while for me to move past the pain of losing Blaze. As I grew older, the responsibilities of earning a living kicked in. I got a job with a road construction crew, focusing on tasks like digging trenches and aiding in laying pipes aligned with the road's direction. These pipes served various purposes, from regular sewage systems to smaller conduits for the Department of Transportation, safeguarding fiber optic cables used by traffic cameras. I distinctly remember it being a Friday because I was chatting with a colleague about our weekend plans. We were looking forward to catching a new band's performance at a downtown nightclub. Our boss interrupted, urging us to speed up the pace so we could finish on time. He then instructed me to take a tool from the truck, a tool used to push a red and white striped tape, affectionately nicknamed Candy, through the pipes. This made it easier for the fiber optic engineering team to later pull their cables. As I returned with the tool, a car lost control and headed straight towards me. I tried to dodge, but my movements were too slow. Strangely, in my mind, everything seemed to slow down, and I had a brief moment to calculate my unlucky fate seconds before impact. I remember the pain and the sensation of something wet flowing down my arm. Attempting to sit up, my boss shouted for someone to grab the first aid kit and call 911. Gradually, I started feeling cold and weary. However, I could hear reassurances that help was on the way. Besides the initial pain, my transition was relatively peaceful, even somewhat pleasant. Now, I hovered above my body, observing my boss step back and paramedics rush in. I felt detached from the entire situation, no longer concerned about the fate of that body. To my right, a tunnel appeared, and I began floating towards it. I went through it with a sense of detachment. There isn't much I can say about the tunnel experience that has been recounted in numerous near-death experiences, so I'll skip ahead to the destination. Upon emerging from the tunnel, I found myself in an expansive field of wildflowers, more vivid and colorful than a rainbow. The flowers emitted a pure melody that pleased my ears, and their fragrance wafted through the air. I was astonished at the beauty of the place. Across the field, I noticed a figure walking toward me. He wore regular clothes, just pants and a button-up shirt tucked in. However, he lacked shoes, which struck me as odd. "Beautiful place, isn't it?" he asked as he approached me. While I know people often mention thought communication in near-death experiences, when this person spoke to me, his lips moved. "Where are we?" I asked. "It doesn't have a formal name, but you can call it heaven," he replied, adding, "Would you like to see more?" "I think I would," I replied. We began traveling through this beautiful sea of flowers, and gradually, a small house came into view. We walked towards it, and it seemed like more of a mountain cottage, middle in size, perfectly blending into the picture-like scenery. It was almost like a scene from a painting. A clear blue stream flowed beside the house. As we approached, the man, still unknown to me, told me that someone wanted to see me. "Who?" I asked. Then, he whistled loudly, and a dog came bounding out from behind the cottage. I immediately recognized him. It was Blaze. As Blaze leaped into the air, halfway throwing himself towards my body, knocking me to the ground, and starting to lick my face, the man said again, "Looks like he really missed you." From that moment, regardless of what anyone called this place, it turned into heaven for me. I had thought I would never see Blaze again, yet here he was, ready to play together. Overwhelmed with happiness, I cried, and Blaze and I ran around freely in this place. I found a stick by the stream, and we even played a game of fetch. I don't know how long I stayed there, but we made every moment meaningful and happy. After a while, the man walked over from where he had been sitting, watching us, and asked if I was ready to go back. "Go back? Go back where?" "I want to stay here," I said. "I'm sorry," the man said. "It's not your time yet, so you have to go back. But when it is your time, Blaze will be waiting for you here." As I said my goodbyes to my closest friend, a deep sense of disappointment and sadness washed over me. That person had vanished, and I found myself unsure of how to return to my body when suddenly, everything faded to black. At first, I thought I had become blind, only later realizing that my eyes were closed. Upon opening them, I found my parents in the hospital room. They promptly advised me not to sit up, cautioning me about the stitches. A few minutes later, the doctor on duty entered, telling me the detailed steps he had taken to save my life, starting from the severed artery in my wrist to the broken ribs, concussion, multiple abrasions, and the necessity for another surgery on my leg for a chance at walking normally again. I tried to tell everyone who came in that I had seen Blaze in heaven, but my words didn't assure anyone to believe. Some even regarded it as an effect of the medication they adopted initially. Yet, it felt too real to me. I've heard others express that their near-death experiences felt more vivid than reality, and that precisely reflects my encounter. Religion wasn't a big part of my life, and encounters with Jesus or conversations with God or angels didn't happen to me. A life review didn't take place, but a visit to heaven did. And I hold on to the belief that one day Blaze and I will roam freely again in that sea of flowers and burst laughter on the other side.
What happens when our beloved animals pass away? Opinions vary widely because the Bible doesn't specifically address this question, and conflicting views persist. Some traditional pastors insist that animals don't possess a soul and, thus, have no chance of entering heaven after death. However, an increasing number of theologians adopt a more open attitude toward this issue. Randy Alcorn, a leading expert on the Christian afterlife and author of the bestseller Heaven, extends this perspective to animals. He writes, horses, cats, dogs, deer, dolphins, and squirrels, as well as the inanimate creation, will benefit from Christ's death and resurrection. Alcorn believes it would be simple for God to recreate a pet in heaven if he so desires. He's the giver of all good gifts, not the taker of them. If restoring our pets to the new earth brings us joy, that might be reason enough. Consider parents who acquire a pet because of their child's request. Indeed, the Bible confirms the presence of animals in heaven. Isaiah 11 verse 6 describes various predators and prey living in peace, with a little child leading them. If God created animals for the Garden of Eden to illustrate his ideal place, it follows that he would include them in heaven. In Revelation 19 verse 11, Jesus is depicted riding on a white horse. So, if a horse is in heaven, why not our dogs? Martin Luther, the father of the Protestant Reformation and founder of the Lutheran Church, outlined, in Paradise, there was complete harmony between man and animals. One day, that harmony will be restored, and all creation will be made anew. In this new creation, humans and animals will coexist peacefully. Other theologians argue that certain Bible passages suggest animals do have souls, although not of the same kind as those of believing Christians. While the Bible doesn't explicitly state whether animals have souls or can be reborn, an increasing number of religious leaders are considering the prospect. Pope Francis comforted a boy whose dog had just died, saying, "One day, we will see our animals again in eternity." Paradise is open to all of God's creatures. Pope John Paul II later expressed, "Animals possess a soul, and we must love and feel solidarity with our smaller brethren." Some believe that God will restore our beloved pets in heaven, not because they have souls, but as gifts for our pleasure. All things are possible. Based on his declaration and the fact that our all-powerful God created the universe, we should anticipate a joyful celebration and reunion with our pets, friends, and family in heaven, a wonderful, exciting place beyond our wildest imaginations. Do you have a pet that has passed away, or do you believe it awaits you in heaven? Please leave a comment to discuss it.